neno moja na muniwerasi maana miko 75 years old. Ya kwamba tangu lini mwanaume wawili wanaweza lala kitanda moja na bibi moja? Sasa tunaona Wamarwa na Kibaki wanazunguka Ngiro. Sasa Harambee! Mimi nawaambia tuliunda KANU tarehe 18 mwezi wa 5 1960 kule Kirigiti, na kupanga kuwe na national political organization moja ya Kenya. Tulikuwa na koka ya KANU 1960 February Jivaji Garden Nairobi. Kwa hivyo naye KADU His Excellency akiwa mmoja wakeunda tarehe 10 mwezi wa 7 1960 siasa zikapamba moto. Kwa hivyo hiki chama ndio mama wa nchi hii na kitadumu. Mkutano wa Your Excellency inathibitisha ulivyosema, you rule for the next 100 years. Sisi hapo Nakuru yote na ndio wamejaa wajahu. Tuko nyuma yako. Ukienda kupigana kiti watu wanakuuliza uroka nake ya Makiriku. Alafu lazima waseme ni KANU. Ni hau. Kwa hivyo mimi ndio nikome maana mmenipa heshima kubwa. Lazima tutapiga kura zetu zote. Ati munasema kuna watu wasijui naitwa nani na sasa walikuwa 3 wa kuongeza wawili, there are 5. Sasa kitanda ya watu 4 na mama moja itawezekana? Hakuna. Sasa sisi hatutakubali kamwe kugawa kura. Tutapiga kura zote kwa Jogoo na Uhuru. Bas.
We have Andrew Muriithi asking, why are we taking us down memory lane? Remembering Kihika.
You were speaking like a Chagwa, eh?
Oh, there you go.
You're speaking like a Shagwa.
That's the way the Chagwa speaks nowadays.
All right, Andrew, what do you want to comment on that?
Well, my comment is, this is the history of sycophancy and lack of principle that has characterized Kenyan politics. I mean, we remain a poor country because of this poor quality of leadership. Remember that the gentleman you have highlighted, we read history, young ones, we read history that he was a point person in the 70s for trying to change the constitution to block the late President Moi from the constitutional provision that would allow him to become president for, in the event of the passing of the late Jomo Kenyatta.
Yeah.
So to hear the same person, of course, then spewing.
Thank you. Just one line. Patrick, you remember him?
I do. I mean, I remember that. I remember quite well. I mean, and this, the days of fiery nationalism as the country was coming alive and everything else. Unfortunately, what has happened is that beginning is what has set the standard for today. And the country has not changed. We came out from colonialism into that, and that is what we kept up to now. And unfortunately, if that continues, this country is not going to grow. We have to completely and radically change our political environment. And even these talks that are happening, that is the origin of that kind of thing that is happening now. Right? The fact that, votes, I control the people behind me and nobody dare touch what I'm saying. That is the political thinking. Whereas these people have given you a mandate to go and represent them. Don't talk as though they don't matter. Those people actually matter. And that is what you're hearing there. Those people don't matter. It is me, I, and my people.
All right, Kimani Kihika there. Munyasi Sako?
Kika Kimani is another politician whose name I've just forgotten, also from Nakuru. They were quite famous. They said what came up without too much.
Chotara maybe.
Chitara.
Karaoke.
Yes. They sort of just,
Speak up, think later.
Yes, think later. But now, on this issue, on the talks on cost of living, so I'm hoping that over time, these stopgap measures don't dominate our scene.
Right.
That Parliament
We'll come to it.
takes care of that.
All right, still all the museum also running on the split as well. We can see Alexander Mugo, who died in 1990.
Bishop.
Bishop,
Yeah.
yes, Alexander Muge, in 1990. Also, during that particular month, we had also in 2000 Father Kaiser as well passing on, just to bring up pictures from the archives as well, that in the month of August, they normally say it's a jinxed month, so to speak. You're nodding your head, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, August, the jinx for me in August has been whenever you have road accidents. You remember the fact that August was a month of bad road accidents in this country. Yeah, every year in August, a lot of people used to die on the roads. And I think it was to do with school holidays, people going out and not being careful and everything else. And August was a bad month in this country. So this issue you're bringing it up because of two important people two important clergy who passed on. But I think generally in the country, August has been a bad month.
All right. We can see also a very telling picture, Bill Okero there, before we continue with our discussion, just hacking back into history. This was the bomb blast, and this is Joseph Kamoto, who was also adversely affected there. I think he was at the U.S. Embassy.
No, he was in his office, but the embassy was next door.
He was in his office, okay.
I think, in fact, the U.S. ambassador was in his office.
They were,
But in the cooperative bank building. But the U.S. embassy was right next door.
On the wall side of the building.
So I think they were slightly injured.
Right. Bill Okero, we have senator that I think has moved on to say that the compensation also for the victims of the bomb blast should be meted out. The American embassy or the America has vetoed that, said all these victims were compensated. So I don't know where do we stand at.
Americans are not going to compensate you. I think we're just wasting our time. We are lying to our people. From 1998, this is the government that should compensate these people. These people are Kenyans. Americans have compensated their people, their nationalities, their citizens who died or were injured in the accident, in the bomb blast, have been compensated handsomely. In tens of millions of dollars. I think about $30-something million per person. Around $35 million per person who died, they were paid. But I do not expect for 1 minute that Americans will compensate Kenyans who are working at the embassy. Forget about Kenyans who are injured out there on the streets. They have refused to compensate. And they base it on their own laws. So I think whether our Senate engages the Senate in the US or not, I think we're just trying to mislead our people. I think what the government needs to do is say, look, okay, these are our people, they were injured, yes. Let us find a way of compensating them. They can. I mean, look at how much money is being spent in this country every year on things that are not worth it. So, but I think otherwise, I don't believe the Americans would be willing to compensate. They haven't done that. There's no history. They'll look after their people, but they won't compensate you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, that is the news here. Of course, just hacking back into history to refresh your memory where you are at or why you are at during that particular bomb blast time, and also just bringing up some of the faces that maybe also the Generation Z are not really familiar with, like Alexander Muge and Father Kaiser as well. Right, let's continue apace with the conversation on the cost of living. And Bunyasi Sako, I had to cut you off a bit. We wanted to chime in on the cost of living.
Well, no. All I was saying is that, first of all, I think it's a good idea that people are sitting and talking now rather than shouting, from the sides. But I'm saying that in terms of mainstreaming this going forward, this ought to be discussions within Parliament. This is where the agenda is going to run throughout the year, because on a daily basis, they're going to be dealing with the expenditure side of things. They can monitor the revenue side of things, or the impact side of things, and they should be able to check each other. There are very many ways in which that can be done, and in which, particularly in Parliament now, with the research department, very competent research department, we will be able to enrich all sides or all persons that are interested. Because I think the idea of non-elected people arrogating themselves these arbitrator roles is not a terribly great thing in my view. Whether they're religious, they're this, they're that, it doesn't really matter. They can advise over time, but now we get outcomes that are intended to get back into Parliament and be enacted pretty much along the lines. Now that's not what we should be doing in effective democracy.
Okay. We'll want to buckle down and discuss the salaries, and let me just run us by this particular story, where the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has announced a pay hike. The new salaries will be backdated to July the 1st, 2023, and comes after freeze announcement announced in 2021. However, President William Ruto and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, will not benefit from the increment. In the latest review, retreats allowances have been scrapped. And as William Lusigi reports, the SRC has received 27.1 billion shillings to effect the increment.
After 2 years freeze on salary increment, public and state officers will now have a sign of relief following salary hike of between 7 to 10%. In the latest review of the salaries, President William Ruto and his deputy Rigathi Gachagua will not benefit. Their salaries will remain at Kenyan shillings 1.4 million and 1.2 million respectively. The review was announced by SRC chairperson Lynn Mengich. Cabinet secretaries, for instance, will have their salaries increased by about 3.5% to 957,000 from the current salary of 924,000.
The National Treasury advised SRC to consider reviewing remuneration structures within a budget allocation of 21.7 billion for the year 2023-2024.
The National Treasury has allocated 27.1 billion shillings for the 2023-2024 to undertake the exercise. Among beneficiaries of the salary review are teachers, who will get the lion's share of the pay rise. The Teacher Service Commission has been allocated 44.2% of the total amount, followed by Armed Forces at 20.9%, while counties will get 18.8%. Civil service and state officers will get 8.5% and 4.3% respectively.
Officers in the executive will be allocated 126 million, which is 0.6% of the total allocation. Parliament state officers is 78 million, which is 0.4% of the total allocation.
Beside the salary hikes, SRC has also reviewed various allowances. In the latest review, the Commission has scrapped retreat allowances, seating allowances for institutional internal committees, and task force allowances for institutional internal committees. According to the Commission, payment of the allowances in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation. The Commission has also reviewed the daily subsistence allowance, where allowances for local travels have been standardized.
Payment of retreat allowance in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation and consequently ceases to be payable. Payment of sitting allowance for institutional internal committees in addition to the basic salary amounts to double compensation and consequently ceases to be payable.
The salary increment is expected to pile more pressure on the wage bill that has since crossed 1 trillion mark, with SRC forecasting it to hit 1.17 trillion, up from 1.10 trillion.
This is a 2.1% increase on the current wage bill that stands at 1.10 trillion.
Willie Lusigi, KTN News, Nairobi.
All right, and that is what is headlining most of the dailies today, just the salary hike. We just want to slice it and dice it with our panelists. Let's just begin with you, Nderitu Mureithi. Okay. The big salary review so far, and people I saw on social media saying, hey, what about the private sector? It's only the government who are increasing these salaries. Should we be increasing the salaries given the current state of play as far as the economy is concerned? There's a money crunch. There's not even money for pension.
Well, I'm not certain that that's really the case. This is a cost of living adjustment. Remember that public sector wages have been frozen at the same level for nearly 3 years. During that period of time, the cost of living, if you just take electricity alone, if you're a small consumer of 50 units or below, your cost has gone up 65%. Just in the last 12 months, not in the 3 years, in the last 1 year. If you are domestic, 50 units or less, your cost has gone up 65%. If you are slightly higher consumer at 200 units, your cost has gone up about 45%. So what the SRC is doing is a cost of living adjustment. The private sector has not been under wage freeze. So you would expect that the private sector or companies have been adjusting salaries because of what is happening with the cost of living. So it goes back to the original question. If we don't manage the cost of living, if government is unable or unwilling to bring the cost of living under control, all other things go out of balance. And that's why cost of living is the primary thing that our colleagues in Bomas ought to be dealing with. I know we've of course been told, opposition, where is your alternative? What ourselves would have done is reduce the budget, balance the budget as the primary method of managing the cost of living, because it allows us to tax less, it allows us to borrow less, and those are the kinds of things that need to be done by any serious government that is interested. As I said, you cannot intimidate inflation or talk it down. You cannot intimidate the exchange rate. You can run circles perhaps around your opponent, but you cannot force the exchange rate to go in the direction against the fundamentals. So personally, I do not agree with those who are, say, critical of this adjustment, cost of living adjustment for public servants. I think they do deserve it. The bigger problem is for government to manage the cost of living.
Managing cost of living, Patrick, about
I want to sort of go back a little bit about the principles of doing salary adjustments in a nation. The way we do it in this country is very piecemeal. Everybody does their bit and they all look at their own crystal ball and then decide that this is how much you're going to give. Let us imagine a situation whereby Kenya, Inc., the country, sits and says, this is how the economy is going to grow. These are the factors that we foresee over the next 2 to 3 years, 4 years, and this is how the economy is going to operate. Therefore, we are going to generate wealth of X for the nation. Now, that wealth has got to be reinvested, some of it in growing the wealth further. The other part has got to reward the nation in terms of the country now being able to, to reward its people for actually generating that wealth. Mm-hmm. That should be done at the national level so that you understand how much the country can afford in terms of wage increments based on the macro factors in the economy. That should then inform any discussion on wages in the country, whether it is public service, whether it is private sector, whoever it is. Your negotiation should be based on an affordability factor for the nation, not on the fact that we have been on a trajectory like this. And that is how you find that countries sometimes overprice themselves on labor. And the country itself can't afford that cost of labor. So what has happened here with the civil servants is absolutely correct. And I mean, the chair of the SRC, Lynn Mengich, is a consummate HR professional. I've known her for a very long time. And what she's doing, she's applying simple principles about the management of the workforce and how you remunerate them and compensate them. And in the 2 years when they've had nothing, the cost of living in the country has gone all over the place. So what they do, they look at they gaze into their crystal ball, look at the affordability within the government, and then they try and see how they can, where they can remove excesses and reward people directly on the bigger scale. So when you see them removing all these allowances and telling people that you are paid to do a job, you can't get an allowance to go and do the job you're paid for, etc., etc. So these are very, very simple principles that are trying to look at the basket and write the way they've chopped the basket and put more money into people's pockets rather than the few people who are able to go for meetings and allowances, meetings and all the rest of it, and generate allowances when they don't. I mean, in the private sector, if I'm going to represent my company in a meeting somewhere, I don't get paid to go and sit there. My costs of getting there are paid, right? But I don't get them paid to say, I'm representing Shell, or I'm representing, whichever company, and therefore I need an allowance to sit here and represent my company. These are the things that have been happening that have been extending that basket unnecessarily. So I think bringing a method to the madness around salaries, I think, is a great thing that they're doing. And if they set all these parameters properly into the operation of the SRCs, so that the rules are very clear about how they arrive where they're arriving at, I think we will have a much better understanding of this civil servants' pay. And then you'll be able to now say, bring in performance-based pay, right? Which is why the performance contracting that we're having at the moment is just a complete it's shambles. It should actually be leading to a fact that, Patrick Obat, this is your performance contract. What happened? And if you didn't, your pay increment is not going to be as high as somebody who performed.
And as we move to our colleague, you see, every year Treasury says to central bank, this is the level of inflation we want. Legally. Now, Treasury has been saying to central bank, we want 5% plus or minus 2.5%, which makes it 7.5%. So here is government. You've already said you are okay with cost of living going up by 7.5%, but your own workers then are not getting an adjustment to deal with that, and that's what SRC is trying to correct.
All right, let's talk about also the allowances, because I think the major stimulant, why people were gravitating towards the private sector was the allowances. Now the SRC is taking it away, and I was just highlighting here before we came back on air that reports we had yesterday, junior officers almost bagging 600,000 shillings every month just on travel allowances. And we had 20 of them, each getting that particular eye-popping figure. This was, how can that be happening without the scrutiny of the entire parastatal oversight?
First of all, the issues of allowances. We have a slightly, I don't know if I was going to say colonial, but maybe that's not it's neither fair nor right. The set of you have domestic workers, an allowance for domestic workers, an allowance for something else, school fees, I don't know what. When I worked in the Ivory Coast with the African Development Bank, I found out that in Ivory Coast, the privileges were similar to what France used to pay their own civil servants, including paid holiday in Paris, or rather in France, every so often and so on. And similarly here, we have also got things we have actually inherited and so on. Somebody should get their salary, and that should be it. And they can decide to manage how they want to use it, whether they're going to get two domestic workers or not, get this allowance or get a Mombasa holiday or not. That should be our own personal choices. So this allowances issue, I think, needs to be looked at. I think we should move towards more and more consolidation and leave the decision making on the distribution of that money. But having said that, the adjustments to cost of living, if they were indexed to cost of living, it would be ideal, but there would be completely different outcomes. What governments would do, they might give what we think are the compensating numbers in shillings, but they will undermine it with exchange rate devaluations. so that the competitiveness outside remains more or less the same. So there are wins and losses, but I think it points to the fact that the economy needs to be managed in a fully considered way. You make adjustments when needed, you take out this, you put in that, and so on. Being paid for sitting allowances, including in the representative assemblies, national and county, I think those should go. I think they should increase the basic figure, but there are reasons why they didn't do that initially, because pensions and other things are based on a low basic salary. For a long time, when I entered Parliament, the basic salary was 200,000 shillings. And the MPs are earning near 900 with other adjustments. So government gets away by saying your final payments are not related to what you have been earning 900, they're based on 200,000 shillings, for example, just as an example. But I think we have to get a medium in which those allowances are removed and they become part of basic. But they won't all be removed to become part of basic for some of them, because the differences are astronomical.
All right, so you are really advocating for the increment of salaries because, of course, the current state of play in the economy, Bill Okero, and the wage bill, 1.1 trillion shillings. This is what this increment is actually going to cost the exchequer. We have the administration that is wanting to really pare down on the wage of billing, the wage bill, but still now we have an increment. What sort of a discretionary instruments should we use when we are faced with such a circumstance that we're in as a country, where there is no money? You even don't have money to pay your 85,000 pensioners who will be actually exiting, and you want to revise that particular age now to 55 from 60.
I think if you look at the announcement by SRC, let me start from there. They did not put this as a cost of living adjustment. They said it's to harmonize the terms and service of public servants across the entire public service. That we have a situation where certain cadres in certain public service institutions earn more than similar people in similar grade and similar qualifications. So it was an attempt to try and harmonize. And this is why they said we are not paying much to the public servants who are working in state corporations, because they are more highly paid. Teachers were the lowest when they tried to do this harmonization. That's why they're putting teachers, and then to try and bring people together. If you have two people who have the same qualification, same experience, and then public service, one earns 1 million shillings in one office, another earns 100,000. They are looking at a situation where, for example, in certain state corporations, a very junior officer is earning more than what a CS earns in a certain ministry. I remember we did this exercise in 1999. I was in a presidential commission, I think headed by Benjamin Kipulei. We did the same exercise, trying to harmonize the terms and service of public servants across the entire, and this is the same thing that they've done, which I think is a good thing, because you have this disparity. Why disparities in the pays in the public service? And this is what I think they were trying to address. But there is no doubt that last year, when Indira's team was in government, the wage bill was around 52% of the total revenues that they collected of 2 trillion. Now at 1.1 trillion, it will still be around 52% of whatever this government collected as of July this year. Of course, to any government, that would be alarming. I mean, if you spend more than 50% of your total revenues just paying salaries, what are you going to do with all the other expenditures? You know, the other current expenditures, development, loans. I mean, it's clear that we are living beyond our means. It's clear we have a government that is insolvent. I mean, that's the bottom line. Kenya government does not want to admit. Yesterday, they announced they're trying to get arranging for a new Eurobond, $2 billion to pay off
the old ones.
Borrowing.
Then the rating agency said that is almost a default.
You know, so I think when you get into that situation, it's not a very, very good situation to be in. And this is why some of us consistently for the last 5 years or 10 years we've been repeating one message. Please work on expenditure. Our problem is not revenue. Unless the government starts reducing, and I was shocked last week, I think it's the same PS, who said, look, we have no more room for reduction of our expenditure as government, period. Yes. He said it last week. We are not going to reduce our expenditure. And so it's very unfortunate that the economy is in a very bad situation. Kenyans have been taxed out of jobs because manufacturing alone announced they're going to lay off 16,000 workers because of the housing levy alone, because of the additional burden of tax. So with the economic crisis we are in, people have no jobs, inflation is high, interest rates have gone to beyond 20%, the shilling has collapsed to 150 nearly. Every indicator shows the economy is not only headed south, but it's tanking. And then you get into the morning you wake up, and the boss says the economy is now stable. You know, the economy, stability of economy does not mean when you know, it's not about these things. The economy is stable when you have addressed all those fundamentals of the macroeconomics, you know, that we're talking about. So we are in a very unfortunate situation where the government believes the economy is about getting revenue, and it's at least helping them to pay their expenditure, and the rest they're borrowing and they're comfortable. In fact, if you read this story, it says we had a deficit of 300
billion shillings.
So to revise, the economy is stable. The same announcement was made by the president on 15th of March.
Yes.
And on 30th, they could not pay salaries. You remember us this year?
Yes.
15 days later, after that statement that the economy was stable, we could not pay salaries. So I think we, the civil servants, of course, deserve a review. And again, for the governments, by the way, including this one, it's a very good thing when the civil servants get this, because it makes everyone now happy with the government.
Morale improves.
Every public servant now will say, these guys are good. And this is the feel-good attitude, is one of the things governments want.
But let me chime in on that, because let me become a cynical self. The optics that you represent to the nation is around government spending, getting jobs in government, and the government looking good. So that instead of the government cutting its jobs and being able to live within its budget, it transfers that load to you and me.
Correct.
So we're the ones who sack people, take them home and everything else in order to feed the government for it to look good. I think it's the wrong way of going around things. That issue of being able to manage your budget has to be spread across the whole employment, the employment environment. The government should do its bit. The private sector will do its bit, because we can't afford to sort of get money from somewhere to pay salaries. You can't even get that money, because the people you're going to get that money from will tell you, no, we can't give it to you. But unfortunately for Kenyans, when the government comes to borrow money to pay things that are in excess, you can't say no. Anyway, as we sit now. But as Enrico said, Sri Lanka happened. Sri Lanka happened.
A quick right of reply. A quick right of reply, Dibal. Because a quick right of reply. In my own defense, yes, I was in government last year as governor of Laikipia County. In that role, Senator, you will be happy to know I reduced salaries, you see, you to 35% of the total budget, which in fact is the requirement of the Public Finance Management Act. Yeah? And many governments, both at county level, certainly at the national level, are not living up to that target. That is how the financial markets were very warm and positive about Laikipia. That is why I could arrange leasing where no other county could do. That is how the financial market stepped forward with the infrastructure bond for Laikipia, which incidentally was frustrated by Senate. So just in my defense, that yes, I agree, I was in government, but I ran my government with the right principles. I was the only government, in fact, both of the 48 governments, to do a restructuring program. First of all, right sizing, placing people in the right places, and ultimately a redundancy package that involved 218 people. Yeah.
Which moved to court.
Well, they moved to court, yes, as is their right, of course. They should have moved to court. And we went to court, and the court examined and ruled that, in fact, myself and my government, we had done the right thing. Because when you declare redundancy, it's not just you tell people to go home, you have to have a whole package that you're paying them. It is simply that the job that they were doing is no longer necessary in the organization. For instance, I had senior telephone operators, okay? You know, nobody runs a telephone exchange anymore.
And we have a lot of those in this administration.
So the opportunity to do the right thing is enormous if leaders are minded. But thank you for allowing me to defend myself.
If we truly take a stock on the auditing of the staff in the public sector, you'll find we have a lot of those where, you know, we are in a different stream of time, but people are still operating on the snail mails that are delivered instead of using emails, or the telephone operator.
Absolutely.
Look, not allowed to come in.
Again. It's just that's it. 52% absenteeism in the health sector across Kenya is 52%. When the Ministry of Health and the World Bank, they go to do these health indicator survey, they go to 3,000 health facilities and do a spot check to see the people who are supposed to be at work, are they at work? 52% are absent. So even as we say we need more medics, we need more nurses and so on, we must always remember that 52% are typically absent from work. We need to do our job better in managing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say from Bunyasi Sako.
Now, Governor Director has spoken so much that now I don't know where to start. But at one point, I wanted to start off from the point he talked about managing to get the wage bill to about 35%. And my question is what I was going to ask, but I don't want to draw him in again. But I was going to say,
because he'll defend himself.
Yes, for a long time. I wanted to find out. The question was, what moved? You know, this is a percentage outcome. It's a product of various things that were done, and therein lies the key issues. He had said he had reduced that the percentage, maybe might have come down, but what actually moved? And it can come down also by lowering the, adjusting the
salaries.
Yes, the denominator and whatever it is, so that the 35 is what you get out of it. You can do. The key thing is managing the implication. The key thing is the implications of those changes. That's what government should be doing. Sometimes they are shy for political reasons not to do that. The operators are still there in all these places, except that technology has eased it off. It will tell you if you know the person's extension, just dial it now, or if you know it next time you call directly. The job has not gone away, but if you are unable to do all of that, zero, you go back to the operator. There is always some operator there. But it's a residual, truly residual. And it's not a position in the hierarchy that we used to have. And if that's still there, it's really a cake and needs to move out. But I think that at the end of the day, Kenya is moving towards increased digitization. I think it's a healthy thing. So hopefully, the number of hands needed to do that will, over time, relatively speaking, go down. We need now, for example, lay off workers in many places. I've seen even in social conversations. But the cost of laying off within the law is also quite high. And you have to find out which one is the more cost-effective, over the time frame that you're looking at. Do you carry part of this burden and by attrition let them reduce? Or do you actually take the action now, do the golden handshakes, whatever those are called, and get a dividend immediately that will help you to finance that increase? The dividend, by dividend I mean the savings you make, will help you to finance those high costs that used to be there and now are no longer going to be there, and you can reapply the money somewhere. So there are decisions to be made. Bottom line, Governor Nderitu came off very well as governor at the time when he moved his county to a position which met some of the critical indicators necessary to indicate that now there is financial, what is it in the, financial responsibility. I don't know what we call it, something.
Fiscal responsibility.
Fiscal responsibility. That's what I was looking for. And it was really a healthy direction, because going forward, counties are going to borrow. They can't borrow unless they meet certain fundamentals and so on. And for me, I think it's a good thing that out of 47, you get 1 or 2 that are making it. You get the leaders and others follow. You don't try and move up at the bottom. You move up with the pace of the leadership, and you work to increase the others. So I think this is a necessary cost development. Some are high, some are low, but I think the solution, and you can't get an overnight solution, that you must be working towards a sustainable position.
Thank you. Let me say this. You know, governments, generally our governments, they are very shy about this issue of increasing salaries for public servants for a long time. From the time of Kibaki, the policy has always been to rationalize public service expenditure, particularly by reducing or retrenching employees. That has been one of the things that started from 2003 when Kibaki came in. But you know, it's one of the things that government don't want to do. To retrench a public servant, they feel it is one of the things that will cost you votes seriously.
It will cost you votes.
Of course, yes, and that's one of the things. So, in fact, this review of salary increase, the timing, the coincidence with the Tax Finance Act is quite telling that when you have decided to squeeze Kenyans on the side of the tax, then you're giving also a salary increase. One would have thought IMF, as a matter of policy, you know, these people worked for those fellows. As a matter of policy, they would not, in a situation where we are, the kind of fiscal deficit situation, they would not approve of any increase. In fact, they would be insisting on retrenchment, or at least on the minimum of freeze on the wage. But, you know, I think having done so much in terms of agreeing to IMF on taxing Kenyans, then I think the government had to get this also approved for them, that they can also increase. So the timing is not an accident. This is a well planned.
Okay, but I thought also the rationalization was on the cards as one of the demands from the Bretton Woods.
Yeah, but they would very, very rarely accept something like this. For them to accept this, you must have let them get away with so much. They must have taken an arm and a leg, and they did through the Finance Act.
All right. So we have.
You will notice Bunyasi and I are very quiet on that issue.
I wondered why Bunyasi
they cannot prove that.
Look. We cannot run away. We cannot run away from our careers. I think my colleague was in ADB, then he was in the World Bank. I was in IFC and in the World Bank. So now, but I do want to perhaps only one point in relation to that. It is true, the US, as the major shareholder of these institutions, does tend to dictate perhaps more than its fair share. As Mheshimiwa Bunyasi just explained, remember, the US, first of all, is a large economy and a dominant world power. So when they raise interest rates, what tends to happen is that markets, smaller markets, suffer because people run away from our market. You have seen the way over the last year, foreigners, even whatever, not foreigners, investors have been selling off Kenyan securities and stocks to go and invest in the US. That's why you have seen the NSC has really struggled over the last, say, 12 months. It's the direct result of a policy in the US, they themselves managing their own issues of cost of living. Now, so they hit us at that level, but they also control what the World Bank, you will notice, the World Bank president is always an American, and the IMF president is always a European. Because these powers, by virtue of their shareholding in these institutions, they are very dominant in the way they run. So but it is for us as a nation to put our affairs in order. I mean, we can't blame the other person for looking after themselves. Why are we putting you see, how we wish the country's boss would go in a different direction. Because the truth is, the economy is not in a good place. Even if you need to give citizens confidence, maybe that's not the way to do it. Paying loans that were borrowed by previous administrations, that's what governments do, that's what companies do. If Mr. Obath becomes CEO or chairman of a different company tomorrow, he can't say he won't pay the debts he finds on the balance sheet. I mean, how would that be? If you look at the debt register, you will find there loans from 1968. And that's the way it works. The country is a going concern. So we should not really pretend like we've done something really big if we have paid loans that were incurred in the previous. And the governments that come after this one will pay the loans.
It's a rollover.
It's a rollover.
All right. We wanted just to interrogate that, and I think, Bill, you had raised that issue of the 300 billion shillings being paid. And
I think more the stability.
The economy is stable, and we have paid 300 billion shillings. And yet, is that the financial truth that the president is trying to project it? Because we've seen also the Eurobonds, they're in the offing.
No.
So is what we're being told the truth? Far from it.
It's the government is not only being economical with the truth, but the government is literally misleading Kenyans when they say that the economy is stabilized. The issue of payment is completely, I think, misplaced, because the government has paid not less than 1.5 trillion last year to service debt. So paying 300 billion to pay Uhuru, whatever, the way this headline is, we pay 300 billion Uhuru era loans.
No, that has stabilized the economy.
I mean, the government paid about 1.5 trillion last year. That is the annual payment, for service of debts. So it's 300 billion is a joke. But I think what the media probably got it wrong. But I think what the president talked about is when he came in, he did say that I want my administration to reduce public expenditure by 300 billion. So ministries were told, can you rationalize and reduce expenditures by 300 billion? But that does not have any impact on the state of the economy. The economy is not about government. There seems to be a confusion in this government. Everyone who speaks in this government thinks the economy equals to government of Kenya. If the government gets revenue, the economy is good. If the government pays its salaries, the economy is good. No, the economy is far much more than that. The economy is about the well-being of the people of Kenya. The cost of living is one of the fundamental issues, that people have their well-being. They have no jobs, they have no incomes, they can't put bread on the table. That's what the economy is about. It's me and you getting jobs, our kids getting education, people being able to pay for medical bills. This is what the economy is about. The economy is not about government. And this is why we think all this clamor for more taxes so that government has more money, and will not necessarily translate to an antidote for the economic problems we have. No. That the government will collect 5 trillion and then tomorrow our economy is resolved. No, that's not the way. I think this whole thing is wrong. I think, in my view, the economy is far from being stable.
All right.
Fast.
So the government is still on a spending spree, Patrick Obath, because we have up the collective sleeves of the government the extension of SGR, and we're seeking $6 billion for that particular extension. So in light of this that has been paid off as loans, then we're seeking 6 billion shillings, and I bet that is in the context of getting another loan to actually extend that particular SGR. What is that telling you?
It's all it does. It talks about the ability to manage an economy, the innate ability to manage an economy. That's what you begin to question. When you build a major infrastructure project, you should actually cast into the economy the impact of that thing over X number, and these infrastructure projects are not paid back over 5 or 6 years. They're 30 years, whatever it is like that. They're long-term investments where you're supposed to use that to stimulate a sector of the economy or trading or whatever it is in the country. Yeah. So the expressway, for example, if you talked about the expressway, if it was a government investment, would have been premised on reducing the time people are on the road, the amount of fuel they're using, whatever it is. You could have put a whole series of indicators and said the expressway is going to sort it out in this particular manner. And therefore the cost is going to be amortized over X number of years as a result of these silent things that are going to happen in the economy that are going to make the cost of doing business in this country better. So when you look at that, if you've got a project that is multi-country, it becomes an even more complex thing to look at. And the reason, and this is my own sort of speculation, the SGR with the Kenya only piece isn't actually making money. If the SGR had been done on the original premise of going all the way to Kigali, then the traffic on the Kenyan section and all the sections would actually have gone up. It would have made sense to dump a container in Mombasa onto an SGR and pick it up in Kigali. It would have shifted people off the road. It would have meant that the cost per kilometer of moving a container would go down to a certain level, etc., 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 and that then has a knock-on effect into the economy. So to go and then pick up this and say now you're going to extend this other side, you have to go back to the fundamental equations that were done and say, what will this mean to the economy of Kenya if we extend that and get that loan? Is it going to improve the repayment of the SGR as we have it now? Is it going to make it better? If so, you work out the economies and then you say, yes, it's fine. And it's the same thing as the road from Mombasa to Nairobi and then from Nairobi to Nakuru, etc., etc. All these are supposed to be enablers whereby they're supposed to make the economy a lot, the economy expand. Yeah? But there's a very long-term payback. So yes, let them go ahead, but we need to see the economic case for it. So that is something that a lot of governments are very, very reluctant to bring to the fore. And if it is brought to the fore and you convince the people, then, and you've done your homework properly, there's no reason why it can't be brought to the fore. But currently, a lot of these projects are legacy projects that individuals want to have. Yeah?
You've said
and that is all it is, nothing else.
Thank you, Muno.
Yeah? Legacy projects. Right. But if there were real projects that had whatever it is, you bring it up here and you can interrogate.
And so you'll have this particular figure being doled out, maybe, and then another time you'll realize, oh, we failed to actually electrify this SGR. So we need to add another 100 billion shillings.
We've not even we did an audit of the current SGR.
We've not done an audit
to see whether it's not just viability, but whether the returns are worth it. Then we can talk of extending it. We have not even done that. Last I remember, up to 2020, I've not seen the last 2 years' figures, but it was doing less than 15% of the total cargo that was landing in Mombasa. It was still very low. It has gone up lately to about probably 20%.
The indirect,
but the premise has been, this is a project that the exceeding value of it will be realized in the future.
No.
With the amortization you're talking about, it is not that immediate. So it's a stimulation of activities around this year that now we are waiting for them to be realized.
The indirect audit on that place is when the previous minister ordered everybody to use it. That shows you what. That's a very simple audit that you can look at.
Unless by administrative.
No, it's because of the headline.
The
headline had written that the train to the railway to nowhere or something. They had to say, okay, everybody must use it now.
We are terrible at sweating the assets that we have created.
Yeah.
In respect of this SGR, you recall that there was in fact it was done, there was a link created from Suswa to Longonot to link this SGR to the old meter gauge so that perhaps it could be used. There was even some effort, which was not finished, for example, to revive the old meter gauge to Nyahururu so that even that side of the economy could use this railway. But generally, we are terrible at sweating, making sure that the assets we have created are generating the impact that they are supposed to. Take the Lapset. The port is usable. The road from Lamu through Garsen, Garissa, Modogashe, Isiolo to Marsabit is 90% tarmac, but nobody's using it. Yeah, the only 200 kilometers between Modogashe back to Isiolo that have not yet been completed to bitumen standards. What am I saying? There is no reason why that corridor is not under use, except government has not seen it fit to do the right work of promoting and ensuring that the corridor is under utilization. And that's what is required. I absolutely agree with Patrick that the original idea of this SGR, unless you really, then it still ends up being a railway to nowhere, unless you can complete the project in the way it was conceived. So we are in a sense stuck. Yeah. Now the question, but it raises some other questions. This SGR was very heavily criticized at the cost of it. That why is it in Kenya everything costs 5 times? Why should a kilometer of road in Kenya be costing 80, 90, 100 million shillings per kilometer when it costs 30 or 35 in our neighboring countries? So the $6 billion, one big question would be what is the per unit cost of it?
All right, I can see we are due for a station break. When we circle back, of course, we shall begin with you, Bunyasi Sakwa.
Thank you.
And also interrogate the issue of Finance Act that we have the latest development from it, just to prime you on that, where we have Senator Okiya Omtatah moving to the Supreme Court right now to try and challenge the lifting of that Finance Act that had been suspended. And we have also billionaire Raval, who is joining the case to root for the Finance Act. And it says that a billionaire businessman Narendra Raval, popularly known as Guru, has voiced his support for the controversial Finance Act 2023, saying it contains incentives that will benefit local manufacturers. The contested law has taxation measures offering protection to certain industries, but also introduce a heavy burden on multiple constituencies, including salaried workers and consumers of petroleum products. So we'll interrogate the issue of the export development and promotion levy that is very key, and this is why maybe Raval is moving in to actually join himself as an interested party on these developments. Where we take a short break.